Well, greetings and salutations, and welcome once again to the Newsman Weekly Podcast, episode number 63. Today, we've got a special post-Labor Day edition of the Newsman Weekly. We'll talk quickly about the origins of the Labor Day holiday, and all of us will offer a brief salute to the working men and women who make this country push forward every day of the year.
Go us.
Go us. We'll also be joined by former Ashland University football coach Lee Owens and Richland Source managing editor Larry Phillips. Owens and Phillips have teamed up on a new book, and we'll talk about that. The book is called The Spirit of a Team. Successful CEOs and coaches share their strategies for achieving success. And I really think that's a book this particular team needs to read because we clearly have no strategies for achieving success on this show. Anyway, the new book has a foreword by former Ohio State coach Jim Tressel, currently serving as the state's lieutenant governor. So stay tuned for that conversation. Many thanks to local country singer Luke Watson for writing and singing Smoke and Drink. This show's fitting theme song and certainly something this group took advantage of during the Labor Day holiday.
That's what it's all about.
It is, you know. My thanks also to the great folks at Relax It's Just Coffee for sponsoring this show and being such a great partner to the Newsman Weekly. Every day, including Labor Day, just starts better with great coffee, and our friend Paul Kimmerling and his baristas at Relax simply have the best in town at 105 North Main Street in downtown Mansfield. So, guys, we all celebrated Labor Day yesterday. So what does Labor Day mean to you?
What does Labor Day mean to me?
Other than a day off.
Well, it's just a chance for Hayden to take another vacation. He's always on the golf course.
Another vacation for Hayden?
I do not golf.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he might as well golf. He's not at work. He's another vacation.
Well, you dragged us in here to work on Labor Day.
You know, I worked 20 years before I ever got a vacation day. This guy's worked here like
20 years without a vacation day? Okay.
I'm asking your wife.
This guy's worked here like a hot minute, and he's had more vacation time this year than I have.
Well, our generation, we like to spend time with our kids and, watch them open presents on Christmas.
We need to add a retirement countdown clock.
Here it comes. Work-life balance. Work-life balance. You know.
What are you going to do when you retire?
I don't know, but you know what I'm not going to do is sit around saying, well, I finally achieved work-life balance. You know?
Yeah.
I'm at the risk of sounding even older than I am. Back in my day, you worked until the job was done, and then you went home. Yeah. And if you had a couple of minutes to talk to your wife and kids, that was gravy on the day.
Well, tell us about Labor Day, Carl.
Well, the nice thing is a lot of men and women worked really hard in this country, especially organized labor, to help provide you young guys with these 5-day work weeks and all these vacations and all these holidays that you enjoy so much.
Yeah. Okay.
Labor Day is an annual celebration of social and economic achievements of American workers. It's rooted in the late 19th century, where labor activists pushed for a federal holiday to recognize the many contributions workers have made to America's strength, prosperity, and well-being. But before it was a federal holiday, Labor Day was organized by labor activists in individual states. New York was the first state to introduce a bill about Labor Day, but Oregon actually was the first to pass a law recognizing Labor Day on February 21st, 1887.
And people were probably like, liberal New York and Oregon,
yeah. But you know
making us not work.
I didn't cover that story in 1887.
You didn't?
But that same year, 4 more states, Colorado, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and New York, all passed laws creating their own Labor Day holiday. By the end of the decade, Connecticut, Nebraska, and Pennsylvania followed suit. By 1894, 23 more states had adopted the holiday. And on June 28, 1894, Congress passed an act making the first Monday in September of each year a legal holiday. Well, many Americans celebrate Labor Day with parades and parties. We have a Labor Day parade in Mansfield every year. Festivities, which are very similar to those outlined by the first proposal for such a holiday, which suggested the day should be observed with a street parade to exhibit, quote, the strength and esprit de corps of the trade and labor organizations of the community, followed by a festival for the recreation and amusement of the workers and their families. And God knows you guys know something about recreation and amusement. I don't think you need a Labor Day for that.
Yeah, back then, like you just like our ancestors needed a holiday for just say come together and have these planned recreation and amusement. And now, it's just crazy. It's a thing of the past.
Now it's incarceration, right?
You get recreation and amusement every day.
What you're telling me though, Carl, is if
too much of it, really.
If we work really hard again.
Can
we earn
How
a
about
second
start?
Labor Day?
Oh, well, certainly, Hayden. Take another day off. Oh, my goodness.
It's been a while since the first one was passed by Congress.
Well, you can have a holiday apparently every other day of the week.
4-day work week.
The fact of the matter
We're
is
just trying to poke him.
that American labor has raised the nation's standard of living and contributed to the greatest production the world has ever known. The labor movement has brought us closer to the realization of traditional ideals of economic and political democracy. So it is appropriate that we all yesterday paid tribute on Labor Day to the creator of so much of the nation's strength, freedom, and leadership, the American worker. Anything else on Labor Day, guys?
I don't think so.
Okay, well,
No.
Hayden, thanks for taking this day off as well. That's enough for now. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Lee Owens and Larry Phillips to talk about their new book. Stay with us. Well, welcome back to the Newsman Weekly Podcast, the official day after Labor Day edition. Joining us now, as promised, are former Ashland University football coach Lee Owens and Richland Source managing editor Larry Phillips. The two of them have combined to write a new book we want to talk about today. Good morning, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Carl. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Well, fact of the matter is, Larry said, "Hey, we're going to be on your podcast." And since Larry's my boss, I couldn't say no. But no, actually, it works out very well. The name of the book is "The Spirit of a Team." Successful CEOs and coaches share their strategies for achieving success. So let's jump right into that. Lee, where did you get the idea for this book? And are you a first-time author, or have you written other things?
Again, thanks for having me. It's nice that this thing times up with our release date with the marketing that's going out of New York by Simon & Schuster here today. So you've been able to order it for quite a while on Amazon, but now it's official.
Yes, the book's official release date is today, September 2nd. So we're happy to have you guys here. But where did you get the idea for this one?
Well, I'd written one other book when I was at the University of Akron, and it was called Blood, Sweat, and Champion. And I used the template of that book to build a championship team for the Akron Zips, and it was more specific to that team and their history and their alumni, and it did well. It's printed through the University of Akron at that time. But this book was a little bit different. I'd retired from coaching and, thought back through all the different teams that I had coached. And, there's 7 different teams we'd gone into, and they were down and struggling and trying to find a way to win. And every time we were able to turn it around and win and win championships. And I just want to be able to tell that story to other team leaders and hopefully tell that story not only to other team leaders in sport or in football, but also in the business world, because I really think the building blocks that we talk about in the book that are used to build teams, and not just winning teams, but teams of excellence, teams of significance, teams that make a difference in folks' lives, like our 85 Galleon Championship team that you mentioned earlier. It's just we were talking earlier. That team changed the lives of a lot of folks. Most specifically, the guy we highlight in Chapter 1, Carl Johnson. We'll get into that later. But I had some folks talk to me about maybe doing a memoir of just my coaching, my career, and make it more a history of my rise through the high school ranks into the collegiate ranks and so on. And I just didn't want to do that. I didn't feel really comfortable doing that. I didn't think anybody would buy it. Really, I think John Spencer, a friend of ours, and early and was working with me prior to Larry, and John had some ideas about, let's just talk to some folks that have impacted you've coached with, or you've coached, or you've worked with, and they've been sponsors or donors to your program, and see how they can fit into the book. So we kind of started with that idea. Then obviously when Larry, John had some issues, he wasn't able to finish that position, and I asked Larry if he'd be willing to do it, and he really kind of took it to the next level with the whole interview process. I mean, Larry's really good about talking with these folks and getting some ideas out, and the interviews, finding information and nuggets about these coaches I'd been around that I didn't know about. Or people who were with me. My wife reads that book, and she said, I didn't know this about Steve Klingscale. I didn't know this about Luke Fickle. I didn't know this about Lat McClure. And, she was just involved in those times we were together as anyone. But so that's kind of how it happened. And so I had a structure in terms of what the building blocks are for team success. And I knew the chapters and the 10 building blocks for that to reach excellence. But we just said, let's reach out to this guy or that guy and see how their story fits into that format. And then their stories of great success, their stories are inspiring, and it really gives great validation to the things that we talk about in the book. And I think Larry can follow up on this. I think it just fell together good. I mean, really, and the book's not just meant to be read one time and then it's a resource book. I don't know if you've ever followed Howard Ferguson when he was a wrestling coach at St. Ed's High School, and he wrote a book called The Edge. Mm-hmm. And I think every coach in America had the copy of that book because, like this book, it had short motivational messages, stories. It had a lot of quotes that would tie into all these concepts that we talked about. So, this is a book I think any team leader, any coach can pick up at any time, and he's dealing with some issue on his team and draw out of it and be able to utilize it at that point in his team building process. So I don't want to ramble on, Larry. I don't know if you can add anything to that thought process.
Well, for me, the fun part or the interesting part or the different part was that it wasn't just focused on sports. We have several business leaders here. For people in North Central Ohio, this was the first chance I ever had to speak with Dan Niss. It was obviously a huge player in the community, and then it was a thrill for me to speak to Dwight Scharr, a billionaire. I don't know how many times people get to speak to billionaires, but I
Dwight two Scharr. Or three this morning.
and I think his feedback to Lee was, "Wow, I didn't know that about myself." But Lee mentioned there the impact of Galleon State Championship on Carl Johnson, and that's a chapter that when he told me that story, I was in on writing the book. Carl Johnson was a kid who really was in a bad scenario at home growing up, and now he's CEO of his own company, Warren Equity Partners, and he came up through in another book where another CEO of a Fortune 500 company singled out Carl as being his Tom Brady.
Mm-hmm.
That was David Cody wrote the book Winning Now, Winning Later.
Okay.
And he talked about how Carl was his Tom Brady. And so chapter 1 becomes Finding Your Tom Brady, which, obviously we saw that statue they put up.
That's a big that's a big statue.
That's what happens when you find the Tom Brady.
Yeah, you get a trophy, that you get a statue that's even taller than Tom was. Now, Larry, you've written 2 football-related books about some of the best football players to ever come out of Ohio. How did this project differ? I think one of the differences is this time you got to actually interview people as opposed to writing about people that you had to do a lot of research because they've long since passed on.
Yeah, I told Lee in the first book, Ohio's Autumn Legends, I had the chance to interview Archie Griffin, which I've talked to before, but Roger Staubach was the greatest player I have ever interviewed, and it is incredible. His story is incredible. If you wanted to diagram how to live a life, just follow Roger Staubach's life. Heisman Trophy winner, Vietnam War veteran, Super Bowl MVP, Hall of Famer, College of Pro Football Hall of Famer. The people in Canton tell me that Roger is the Hall of Famer of Hall of Famers. They say that people are in awe of Roger Staubach who are in the Hall of Fame. He is that kind of aura. And when I spent 3 weeks trying to get a hold of Roger Staubach, and I ended up sending flowers to his assistant, and that's how I got.
That's how you always get people.
And she was a great help. But she said, "We're going to get this done because you want to talk to him about high school, and nobody talks to him about his high school days." And she was right. I had a 2.5-hour interview with Roger Staubach, and he didn't want it to end because he was talking about his high school days. And that's kind of like what Lee the beginning is. Lee taking over programs that were struggling. At the high school level, obviously, Lee's a Madison graduate. He tells stories about going to high school football practice at Madison and a coach that inspired him there. And every step of the way, he took over a program that was not in a good place. Crestview, Galleon, and took them to levels they had never been before. And to see the reclamation, that was definitely different, because in my books I was dealing with high achievers and what they had achieved, and in Lee's situation we were starting at completely opposite end. And really a lot of the subjects in these chapters Dwight Scharr came from as humble beginning as you can imagine. He's a billionaire now. At one time owned the most expensive home in the United States. That's how far Dwight went. And a lot of these guys and gals, Sue Ramsey has a chapter too. And just the journey that they took was so much fun to do and so inspiring too. And I hope that's what the book kind of leads through. It does tell Lee's story, but it tells everybody else's story too, and there's some inspiring messages in there.
It's really cool, kind of cool if you think about it, to be able to tell your story through other relationships you've had with other people. And I really enjoyed doing that. And Larry was really good at finding those points in the interviews that kind of made sure that our two stories, of the story of my coaching career and their success, where we ran into each other, where we collided, and what I was able to learn from them. Larry, obviously, as an author, if you haven't had a chance to read his prior books, we need to plug those things. I mean, I was sure.
Ohio Autumn Legends.
When he had me a chance to read those, of course, I'm a Ohio football guy anyhow. You talk about finding things out about people you didn't know. These are legends in Ohio football, and I'm as much Ohio football as maybe anybody but Jim Tressel, who wrote our foreword, by the way.
Was this book, does this have kind of an Ohio bent to it, or did you just happen to interview
it does.
guys?
In fact,
was that intentional?
We went to two publishers. The first publisher told us it was too Midwest. Imagine that.
I wonder where they're from.
Yeah. But and again, Larry's it was a great pick for me. The combination was really good. And I asked him one day, we're working on this. I said, Larry, could you teach me to write? He said, I would have about as much chance to teach you to write as you would teaching me how to play cover 4 defense. So I didn't need to know how to write. So I said, here's the idea we're going to go. We're going to talk this story, that story. Larry's talking about Roger Staubach, and what's kind of neat about things going full circle, all these guys jump in and out. In I'm talking about a big win at Akron when we finally had a winning season. And who'd we beat? Navy. Well, who was there for homecoming to deliver the game ball and pregame? Roger Staubach. So those are the kind of stories you get a chance to tell that you might not have a chance unless you do a book like this.
Well, but how did you actually select the coaches and the CEOs that were going to be interviewed for the book? How did you pick those guys out?
Yeah, for me, it was who inspired me along the way. Let's talk about Dan Niss. I mean, he come late into my career, and we had a chance to coach Garrett Niss at Ashland, and Garrett did some really good things for us, earned a scholarship, and ended up being a good player for us, getting his degree there at Ashland, and now working for his father. But even more so than that, to watch him and Dan and Brenda interact with our folks, coming to booster meetings, meet some of our players, start hiring some of our players, and then to be able to say, what can we do for you, Coach, to make the program at Ashland give you an edge, and to sustain this success that you've built to this point. Well, I'm thinking, this might be the guy to tell the story about sustainability. Mm-hmm. Once you reach there, stay there, because his story is pretty incredible when you look what he's done and what he's been able to build. And then you start talking about Dan and as a philanthropist, what he's been able to do, and the people he's reached out to and the relationships he built. So again, he inspired me with that concept. What can we do for Ashland to, not only make them different than any other program out there, but to keep them on top of this Division II football situation? And so those kinds of stories, we picked Carl because Carl Johnson in Chapter 1 was a given. I think he probably inspired me to write the book more so than anybody else. Again, as Larry said, you get a kid that had no chance at all growing up on the wrong side of tracks in Galleon. Without football, he doesn't make it. There's no question about it. And then to see what he's done and how many people he's impacted in a positive way. I've been asked many times, what's your greatest legacy in coaching? What team you coached with, or what you did at Ohio State, or championship you won? And no, my greatest legacy in coaching is believing in guys like Carl Johnson as a coach, being a dealer of hope, giving them something to hang on to and a chance to believe in themselves and go and do the kind of things that Carl's done. And so it had to be that. And then obviously with David Cody calling him Tom Brady in his book, CEO of Honeywell, I figured, well, I'm going to steal that term for chapter 1. So.
One of the things I wanted to add there, Lee, while we're talking about Carl, is one of these chapters is about Matt Collick, and a guy who was not a star athlete for you. In fact, it was kind of in an awkward situation, a quarterback who was kind of a leftover quarterback when you inherited the program at Akron. And now today, he's the boss of Leaf Filter, which is just a hugely successful company in North America, and Matt does spectacular things in Northeast Ohio philanthropy and whatnot. And talking with him, just his zest for life, and Lee deals with it in the book here about boy, I don't know if I should have. Maybe he should have got a little better run as a quarterback when I stopped him, because he was obviously a great leader and is with his own company now. So those are the kind of stories that it's not the typical spotlight on the star type of thing. And Matt was one of those guys that kind of came from a little different angle than you might expect. But I thought his story was kind of fun too.
And I had a chance to run into him once the books got printed out. He sponsored the senior tournament at Firestone that they have up there, and I was there about a month ago, and they had an event upstairs, and I had a chance to get a book to Matt, and he's hanging out there with he has a NASCAR team now, and a bunch of team leaders in NASCAR, and he's telling them about the book. And they're all saying, we got to have a copy of that book. And we got to, there's opportunities in building teams everywhere. I mean, look what they go through in NASCAR. And if they're not on the same page and they're not working towards the same goal and making quick decisions at the right time, they have no chance. And so he looked through it in a little bit of time and heard Matt talk about it a little bit and goes, I got to have some copies of that. Coach, I have some copies of that. So, yeah, I hope it works out. And Matt's story, like Larry says, I mean, when I took over at Akron, we had some issues. I mean, there were some things that need to be reworked, and I tried to run off as many of the guys as I could because
there's a reason you guys were 1 and 10.
Yeah, there were 2 guys I couldn't run off. It was Matt and his roommate Chris Coonahan, who right now is his GM at Leaf Filter. Those 2 guys became lifelong friends, and Matt knew he was going to go from starting quarterback for Jerry Faust for the Akron Zips to being a scout team 5th or 16th quarterback, because I brought on these young hotshot players who none of them played very well. I was like Larry said, I should have just played Matt. At least won a couple games,
Jerry Faust, that's a name I haven't pondered in a long time. I remember when Jerry had left Notre Dame. I think he was back. Might have been back in Akron. He might have been out coaching altogether at that point. But I was in Fostoria, and they invited him to come to speak to the postseason football banquet. And I'd not really followed Jerry Faust that much. He spoke for a little over an hour. The one word I never heard him say was football.
Oh.
Yeah.
All he talked about was relationships and attitude and desire and love. And I'm thinking, this guy was a big football coach, and he just never mentioned the word football in an hour-long speech. And I was pretty impressed by that. He was a good dude.
That's the kind of thing I think we ran into in the Sue Ramsey chapter, Lee. And when we were doing this, the publisher said, hey, you really need a woman's voice in this. And Lee and I looked at each other like, we hadn't even thought of that. I mean, it was an obvious critique and a great one. And Lee said, well, I know the perfect example, and she lives 10 miles from here. And so we had an afternoon-long interview with Sue Ramsey, and her coaching philosophy, I think, is very much like that, Carl. And she was much more into the relationship end of it. She tells a great story about how her program turned the corner when the seniors figured out that they should be serving the rest of the team. It used to be, hey, part of becoming a member of the team is that the freshmen have to carry the laundry or whatever. Well, when Sue got to a certain point where one of her seniors said, we got to flip that. the seniors need to make it easy for the freshmen to figure out college. We already know how this works. Now we're going to serve them. And I thought that story and how that was a metamorphosis of her program, and they became national champions.
Well, it worked out really good too. As Larry said, we got the advice of getting a female's voice on this team building and excellence, and I'd really had the 10 blocks that I always talked about pretty much filled, and it just occurred to both of us. Well, let's talk about not just excellence in team building. Let's talk about excellence in life, which we defined as legacy. Again, what we leave behind, who we leave behind, and how we impact people, and how we live a life of significance. And Sue is a perfect example of that. If you watch our women's basketball team at Ashland University right now, Robin goes on and wins national championships. Carrie goes on and wins national championships. That's legacy. That's how it is. And Sue made that impact on people while she was there. And so having a chance in that last chapter to say we talk about team building, but whether it's your team at home or whether it's life in general, these principles work. And they're the kind of things that you talked about with Jerry Faust, and it's not always X's and O's that make the difference.
All right, so what did the two of you learn in the process, and what things do these CEOs and coaches have in common? What are things that, when you look back at the people you talked to for the book, similar or common refrains in all of their lives or all of their journeys that you can identify?
I would say persistence is the first thing that leaps out at me. Dwight Scharr went bankrupt at one time. He's a billionaire now. He was just not going to be denied. And I would say that's kind of the common thread with a lot of these folks. They were just not going to be denied. Dan Niss tells the story that on his wedding day, he was working on a line at CNG. And somebody said, "Hey, Dan, aren't you getting married today?" And he goes, "Yeah, about 40 minutes." But that's how single-mindedly focused he was, and obviously his company shows that today. I think a lot of these folks follow a similar path. Matt LaFleur, he said he didn't really have any choice in the matter. He was going to be a football coach, and his dad was a football coach. His mom was a cheer coach, and that was just his destiny. And he and his brother both are coaching in the NFL. Matt's a head coach.
Well, as a one-share Green Bay Packers owner, Matt's on short notice with me. You better get it done this year. And I didn't like what I saw in Week 1 of exhibition season. I might be calling a board meeting.
What a fan! We're talking about the winningest coach in the history of the NFL in the first 5 years of his career, and he's on short notice.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's Green Bay. I mean,
when you read the book, and you'll find out the chapter that we picked out from Matt LaFleur's is passion. Okay, nobody has more passion than Matt, and that he'd bring it every day, and he'd get after the guys and do it in a positive way. But man, he would get after them every day, and that's how he was coached. That's how he learned coaching, even from guys like Brian Kelly when he worked for him at Central Michigan and in Grand Valley. He'll get after them. I'm going to tell you this right now. He'll get after them, and at that level, it's rare anymore to have that kind of passion.
We got to tell the story. Matt tells a story during our interview with him about when Lee interviewed him, and Lee felt like, hey, we're doing fine, but if we wanted to take the next jump, we've got to really revolutionize our passing attack. So he went out and got Matt, who was a pretty young guy at the time, obviously still is compared to us. But he said we were at, I don't know, where they were playing Gannon or somebody like that, and they're just kicking the daylights out of Gannon. And he said, we're getting 9 yards of carry. We're on the way to running for 400 yards. And Matt said to put in the booth going, Coach, we can throw. We can throw on these guys. He said, we're averaging 9 yards of carry. Why the hell would we throw the ball? He said, but that's how aggressive Matt was, that he just loved throwing downfield and really going after whoever was on the other side.
That chapter on passion, though, is I think it's one of my favorite chapters. It was one we finished real early in the process, and when we got to the publishers to look at it, said, this is good, because it wasn't just Matt's story, but I told Keith Wakefield's story. You gotta love it, man. A guy I played for a Madison clear back when, and that's where I learned passion initially, because it was contagious for me and the rest of the guys on the team. You come out to practice every day in shorts and a T-shirt and just get after you. Gotta love it, gotta love it. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but that's he was selling the passion for the game. You got to love it to do it. Then we tell Matt's story and the way he gets after guys and coaches at that high level. I have a guy at Ashland, Tim Rose, our defensive coordinator. There's not a more passionate man on the universe. And the way he's coached, he's 82 years old right now, still coaching the defense at Ashland. With more energy than anybody else there on the field, still smarter than anybody out there, still better looking than most of the guys out there on the field. Unbelievable.
That is one ugly team.
And then I get a chance at the end of that chapter. We throw in all that again, and finally at the very end, I get to talk in a very serious way about a young man I coached at Ohio State, Corey Stringer. And again, when Corey passed and his father spoke and warned at the very end of the service, he said, Corey played the game he loved and loved the game he played. Summed it up. I mean, that's the kind of player he was. Great players, great coaches, they have one thing in common. They love what they do, and it's a great passion for the game. You asked me earlier the one thing I learned probably better than anything else doing this book, particularly because we tied in coaches and business leaders and CEOs. Coaches have been very successful at the highest level. CEOs who've gone from nothing to, great success. Is that, first of all, it's no different in the business world than it is in the sport world. The kind of thing we do as coaches, they do in the business world every day to be successful. I mean, we had a chance to interview a national championship head football coach, Nate Moore at Massillon. We had a chance to interview Larry Karras, Division III, won more football games than any football coach in America at any level. We had a chance to interview a major Division I coach, Luke Fickell at Wisconsin, one of the top Power 5 coaches in the country, and obviously Matt LaFleur at Green Bay. Their stories were all the same. It didn't matter what level you were coaching at, whether it was high school or Division III or the Green Bay Packers, they were all doing the same thing. And then to take it a step further, talking to guys like Dwight and Matt and Dan and Bob Sebo and Carl Johnson, they were all doing the same thing. It wasn't any different. No matter what level you coached at, or whether you were doing the business world or you were doing the sport world, those same principles applied, and you could hear them talk about it.
Carl, you mentioned or asked me what surprised you about this book. I think the chapter with Luke Fickell was the one that surprised me the most because an old-time high school sports writer would know that Luke Fickell was the LeBron James of high school wrestling in the state of Ohio.
That's how I first met Luke Fickell, was covering wrestling. And he was a great football player, but he was a better wrestler.
Absolutely.
No question. Yeah.
And to this day, there are people that will tell you Luke Fickell is the greatest high school wrestler in the history of this state. And we didn't really draw it out of Luke, but I wondered if that pressure was just a little too much. I mean, it was to the point where, this guy's going to win Olympic gold. And Luke, he just did not have the personality of, like you see LeBron or Michael Jordan or those guys, and they just, there's a sense of, I want to wear the king crown. You always see LeBron put the king crown on. That is not Luke. He was gravitating towards a football team when he was in high school because of the team. Sure. He wanted to be around guys that were part of a mission, and he felt like wrestling was kind of an individual. Obviously, you're part of a team, but it was more of an individual sport than he was comfortable with, and I thought that was shocking. But yet, he was obviously very successful. Was a 4-year starter at Ohio State, started 50 games, and like Lee said, he took Cincinnati to the national semifinals. I don't think that'll ever happen again. Yeah. And he's coaching in the Big Ten now, and his story is really interesting because it's just so different than what you're kind of geared toward. But that's just what he gravitated toward is that he had a hankering to be part of a team, and to this day, I think. He still has that team mentality on the back of their jerseys. Everybody's got the name team on the back of their,
Together, everyone achieves more. So bought into that,
Plus, Luke Fickell's just downright scary. He was just a big guy.
This is how conscientious Luke is. After our interview, Luke called Lee and said, I don't know if I did a very good job on our interview, Coach. His first coaching job was with Lee at Akron, and he had gone from the NFL didn't work out for Luke, so he turned toward coaching, and he'd been a grad assistant at Ohio State. And when they said it's time to, kind of kick him out of the nest. This is your professional life is about to start. And so Lee called down, and you could take the story from there, Lee. Who did you talk to at Ohio State?
Well, I talked to Dave Kennedy, the strength coach down there at the time, and Luke was kind of working for him as assistant strength coach in the weight room, and it was kind of like, I'm thinking about hiring a defensive line coach, and man, I love Luke when he's down there. I had to coach against him as a player, and man, I know how hard he goes, and I'm just not sure he doesn't have any experience. And like Coach Kennedy goes, so you're debating whether you're going to hire Luke Fickell? You lost your mind. It was a little more flowery than that. But it's true.
I know you coached at Massillon, and I think for 4 years, but there's a Massillon story I got to tell about an individual athlete. I think it was the summer of '84. I was in Fostoria, and we had a linebacker who was really good that year named Chris Hoover, and he went to play in the North-South game. And his roommate that week was a linebacker out of Massillon, fullback linebacker named Chris Spielman. And they lived together in the dorm or whatever during the week. And so I got to talk to Chris a little bit pregame. And it was the second quarter, Spielman rolled his ankle. Now keep in mind, this is just an high school all-star football game. And he barely could walk on it. I mean, Chris was so flat-footed, he was having troubles even then. But I remember in the second half, he was stomping up and down the sidelines, stopping every coach and saying, I got to get back in the game. I got to get back in the game. And every coach is like, Chris, it's an all-star game. Who cares? I care. I got to get back in the game. And that just seems like the kind of persistence and the attitude that some of the folks you're talking about in this book. Chris Spielman seemed to be the exact same way.
Well,
no question.
Lee's got a story about coaching the Ohio North-South game and coaching Carl Johnson in that game, and how Carl's team mentality was even part of that game.
It was, and I've already run into Tom McDaniels and got him a copy, by the way. The old timers coaching group get together every Thursday, I think, in up in Canton, and I showed up, and I was telling the story to Tom McDaniels, and he remembered it. I was assistant to Tom. That didn't always work back then. I was the Massillon coach. He was I wasn't the Massillon coach yet, but I wouldn't have been an assistant. I was still a galleon at the time. Mm-hmm. But anyhow, we've become friends since our times together. But we were talking to the story about Carl was the starting quarterback in that game. Sean McCarthy was the backup quarterback who ended up going to Purdue and then playing a little bit in the NFL. I think he played in New England for a little while. So he's a pretty good player. Well, Carl played the first and third quarter, and Sean played the second and fourth. And if we went into overtime, Carl was going to go back in. I'll be doggone if that All-Star game, the All-Star, not just any All-Star. This is the Massillon All-Star game. That's what Spielman realized. Those are his folks up there in the stands.
Exactly.
But so they're going into overtime, and Sean had scored a touchdown or two in the fourth quarter, and Carl literally, he'd played well in the first or third, but we'd struggled a little bit, and he went up to Coach McDaniels and said, listen, Coach, you got to keep Sean, and he's got the hot hand. This is the kid that I met at Galleon. This is a sophomore. This is not the same kid I started coaching as a sophomore. Just to think of how unselfish it was. Sean goes in, throws a touchdown, and wins the game in overtime, and is MVP. Tom, in the press interview afterwards, calls out Carl and talks about to reporters. We've got it on the print in the clippings that was one of the most unselfish things that he's ever had a player do. To just watch that young man grow and evolve and get to that point from that young guy I met as a sophomore coming into Galleon to where now, he's making those kind of decisions is impressive.
Lee, would you ever consider coaching again?
If
Ryan Day loses to Michigan again and a certain school gives you a call.
Well, I have a son-in-law who's coaching over at Shelby, Robbie Mahaney, and I do get asked that question every once in a while. And at this point, first of all, with the state of college football today, as a head football coach, I'm out.
Yeah, that's a different game.
I'm out. There's no question. I couldn't do what they're doing today, and it's got to be fixed. And I wouldn't be able to go in and handle things until it does get fixed, to be honest with you. So. And as far as helping Coach Mahaney at Shelby, I don't have that time. And between 12 grandkids.
This is his son-in-law, too.
I mean,
married to Lee's daughter, Molly, right?
It gets like the doors open.
Listen, get to the state championship game. I'll let you know if I got time to come to March.
He gets plenty of advice, okay? Robbie, you got to go out and get this guy. That guy. Not literally go out and get them, but get to find a player like that, develop a player like that.
Well, he's got a pretty good quarterback going into this year.
Yeah.
Really good, really good. I think he's as good as I've seen in high school, and I mean, he's special. There's no question about it. He won the Air Force, I think, right now.
Yeah.
Isn't he? Yeah, he's really special. He's not, and just as good a character as he is a player, and a hard worker and all that good stuff. So he's fun to watch.
And that actually linked to our book too, Lee, in that Steve Clinkscale is the foster father of the
His
Sheldon
brother.
quarterback's
Yeah.
brother.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was kind of interesting to talk. I think that family's in San Diego now, right?
Yeah, they are
Or
with
Los
Harbaugh.
Angeles?
He's coaching the secondary for the Chargers. You know,
Right.
You know, so
I'm San Diego Chargers.
Are they
That's
LA?
how old I am.
I don't know.
They'll always be the San Diego Chargers.
Southern California.
But yeah, Steve's the secondary coach for Jim Harbaugh out there with the Chargers, and his family's relocated out there, obviously with him, and I'm sure the brothers are still in contact.
They
with
are,
each
yeah,
other.
yeah. And Steve's a great story too. I mean, he came from Youngstown, Ohio, and played at Ashland, and ended up being the defensive coordinator on the national championship team at Michigan for Harbaugh, and then he's out there coaching in the league right now. And he tells a story about going to Youngstown and recruiting a couple kids out of Youngstown that were on that roster and played in the national championship game. In terms of his legacy, to be able to go back home and grab a couple kids off the street and get them to a point where they're playing in a national championship game, that meant a lot to him.
All right, guys. So the new book is now available. Where can people purchase it? Tell people how to get the book.
Amazon, right? The Spirit of the Team, Lee Owens with Larry Phillips. You can, it's for sale now. There's actually a couple Amazon links. One you can actually get the book on, and the other you can pre-order it. So there's chances to get it ahead of time, and we'll be out doing a lot of book signings. We've got one coming up here shortly in the Mansfield area. We'll be announcing that. Which would be kind of cool. We're looking forward to getting that done. But I think it's a good read. It's a quick read, but I think it's one you want to kind of have on your desk to kind of reference from time to time as you look back at some of the stories and some of the inspirational messages that are included.
I just need Larry to keep signing the checks.
Like I can sign anybody's check.
All
You're
right.
gonna need an autograph copy.
Exactly. I mean,
It's worth more if I don't autograph it.
folks, the name of the book is The Spirit of a Team. Successful CEOs and coaches share their strategies for achieving success. Find it right now at Amazon. We're going to wrap up today's show on that note. Many thanks to Lee Owens and Larry Phillips for joining us today, and best of luck with the new book, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it again, and I appreciate Larry you joining with me.
Absolutely.
You've done a great job. It was fun doing it together.
And thanks again to all of you for listening to the Newsman Weekly. I'll be back in a second to put a bow on this week's episode, but until then, remember what another author, Mark Twain, once said: "If you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything."